Good evening, and welcome to The Way Out Show. I'm your host, Dane McCarthy, broadcasting to you from FEMA Region 5, deep in the bowels of the United Police State of Amnesia. Today is March 4th, 2016. The amazing thing about what's going on is the incredible upset in American politics. You have two wild card candidates, one of whom is pretty much failing, but his message has gone through loud and clear. The other who is apparently winning. Now it's probable that both of these wild card candidates, these rebels, these outliers, these outlaws will fail ultimately to gain the presidency of the United States. But nevertheless, the population, the citizens have voiced their opinion of events loud and clear. We'll see how that all plays out. And I'll talk more about that. But I wanted to show a clip, which I have showed before, but it's very good. It's only 9 minutes long, and it's a pretty good overview of the situation in the Middle East from the point of view of a Syrian patriot. And this is Syrian Girl, and she's talking about why the New World Order hates Syria. And of course, the case of Syria can be transferred to other countries that had similar, very independent, sort of very nationalistic governments, and they were maybe oppressive to anybody who opposed them within the country, but nevertheless they were stable, and these countries were crushed by outside forces. And there's economic as well as political reasons why that happens, and those reasons are not good for the people of those countries. And she explains that in a very clear, concise boil down of the reasons. So let's, and I thought and the reason why I'm playing it is because essentially global politics interests me more than American politics. American politics is only one piece of a much larger picture, and I feel that we cannot understand the local picture, much less the national picture, if we do not understand the global picture, because it just doesn't fall into place. Because ultimately, the politicians are thinking globally, and they are influenced by powerful forces above them. And those are the forces that we as American citizens need to really focus on. And that will help us make our decisions down below more than anything else. So let's run that clip, and I'll get back to the global scene and the national scene.
This is Syrian Girl. I want to talk to you about why the New World Order hates Syria and why they are attacking the country now. The New World Order is a plan to bring all nations under the control of one power. People might argue about who the real power is behind this agenda, but those who are observant will notice that this New World Order, or NWO, is the end game. Syria has always resisted and is the front lines against the New World Order. One of the ways that Syria resists is that Syria does not have a Rothschild central bank. A Rothschild central bank is a bank that has been bought by the Rothschild family, one of the richest and most powerful families in the world. It is a bank which is under the control of the Bank of International Settlements, which decides how much money is worth in a nation and how much debt a nation has. In Libya, one of the first things that happened after NATO took over that country is their central bank was turned into a Rothschild central bank. Another way in which Syria resists the New World Order is that it has no loan to the International Monetary Fund, or IMF. Syria, before the crisis began, was a totally debt-free country. If it has ever taken out loans, it was not to the IMF, but to a trusted ally like Russia. The first thing that Egypt's new President Morsi did when he came to power was saddle Egypt with $4 billion worth of IMF debt, even though he claims to be a Muslim and Islam is against debt and interest. Because Syria owes no money to world powers and her bank is free from foreign control, she is able to choose her own foreign policy. This is why Syria can oppose imperialism like in Palestine, Libya and Iraq, and ban genetically modified food. Syria has never had genetically modified food and has recently formalized this into law. Companies like Monsanto are among the war profiteers, or dogs of war. When Iraq was invaded, one of the first things that US's Bremer changed in the Iraqi constitution was to make it illegal for farmers to store their own seeds and force them to buy genetically modified seed from Monsanto. Genetically modified seeds are very expensive and carry a promise of being better than natural seeds. Many Indian farmers who bought the seeds and had their crops fail that year committed suicide because they had no money to buy new seeds from Monsanto and couldn't have saved their own seeds because they had entered a contractual agreement to purchase seeds from Monsanto. Famine reigned as a result. Controlling food supply is yet another constraint the New World Order uses to keep countries in check and bring them under the control of the one world government. Syria resists these steps to control her. Syrian state media doesn't shy away from discussions of secret societies. In Syria, talk of secret societies is not seen as a fringe conspiracy, but mainstream. Those that tell you it is not significant that two US presidential candidates, Bush and Kerry, were both members of the same tiny secret society, the Skull and Bones, are willingly blind. Oil and energy flow is yet another way in which the world powers bring nations to their knees, and yet another reason why Syria is a target. Syria recently discovered gas off its coast, and she was working on a new pipeline going through Iran, Iraq and Syria to Europe that would rival the BTC pipeline currently going through Israel. Forcing oil to pass through Israel through the BTC pipeline is the way in which the New World Order uses Israel as their hub of control of the oil flow between Europe, Asia and Africa. They can turn off the tap whenever they want, and that brings nations under their umbrella. Syria's attempt to give the world an alternative route for oil and gas could have been a way to free the world and put a wrench in the plans of the global dominators.
And I have spoken about this at length, but Syria is one of the last countries left that does not recognize the apartheid state of Israel and resists the Zionist agenda, which is a large part of the New World Order. This is one of the main reasons the New World Order sees Syria as an obstacle to its plans, and this point requires an individual video.
Another reason why the New World Order hates Syria is that it is a secular country in the Middle East. Afghanistan, Libya, Iraq, and much of North Africa were secular nations. But after the Iraq War, Iraq was given a more theocratic Shiite government. After the Arab Spring and the NATO bombardment of Libya, it was given a Wahhabi extremist government. And recently Egypt became a Muslim Brotherhood nation, another theocracy. And with Israel being the extremist Jewish theocracy in this region, Syria is really the last secular country left in the Middle East. In Syria, asking someone what their religion is insulting. And if an outsider asks you what it is, you can't help but feel a little bit defensive, and the common answer is, I am Syrian. All the prime religions have lived there in peace for hundreds of years, and with freedom to practice. Divide and conquer is a strategy which the world powers use to control nations, and Syria's unity has been a way to resist that. Syria has a very strong national and cultural identity. If you have ever traveled the world, you will notice that you can find the same shops and the same culture being spread everywhere. You can find the same clothing item in a shop in Dubai that you can find in a shop in France. This is not the case for Syria. Syria holds on to its uniqueness and its own production. Coca-Cola and other foreign companies used to be banned in Syria, but years ago the current president unbanned them, which I believe was a huge mistake. Syria had its own cola production companies that were even more delicious, that had to close down as a result of Coca-Cola being unbanned. But these reforms really only went so far to open up Syria's economy, and Syria still resisted entry of foreign companies. And I think this is one of the other reasons that Syria is hated by the New World Order. Syria is one of the last countries that remain distinct from everywhere else, and I believe there's a clear New World Order agenda to make everywhere look pretty much the same, and thereby create no more nations and one world government. What a boring world that would be. The New World Order hates Syria because Syria is free. So Orwellian it is that they shout "Free Syria" when they really try to enslave her. If Syria falls, it could be a tipping point that ends up in victory for the New World Order, like Stalingrad was a tipping point between Germany and Russia in World War II. Syria resists in spite of all the massive power of the nations against her. She resists not just for herself, but for every free person. As I said earlier, Syria is the front lines against the New World Order. So fight alongside us until the end.
Okay, well that was the clip, and I hope you enjoyed it. I like it because it's concise and really does a good job of giving another perspective onto the events happening in the Middle East. Syrian Girl is on YouTube. She has her own YouTube channel and puts out videos pretty regularly on a lot of different topics, but mostly on Middle Eastern issues. So what's going on in the Middle East right now? We do have apparently a ceasefire in Syria, which has been declared, and it's apparently holding. Now, whether or not that's true, I don't know. I hear rumblings that that it's being broken, and the various sides are taking advantage of the ceasefire to consolidate their positions, to regroup, and so on, to go at it once the ceasefire ends. Now, whether or not that's going to boil up into full-blown war, I don't know. But one thing that the news was saying just today is that more and more this conflict is, well, they were saying it was a conflict between Iran and Saudi Arabia. But we have to remember that Iran represents a certain block of nations and a certain viewpoint or mindset, which includes Russia. And then Saudi Arabia represents very clearly the Western powers, particularly the United States. So again, you could say, although it is a conflict that is more and more a hot war, and using proxy countries and proxy armies on both sides, you could say it's between the Wahhabists on the Saudi side, the Sunnis and the Shias. On the Iranian side, you would have, you have this issue where they're fighting over resources, they're fighting over land, they're fighting over power, they're fighting over domination of the world. And that is, of course, again, makes it a global issue. And although I believe that we do have to think globally, it doesn't mean that we have to abolish countries. We do need to prevent too much power falling into the hands of a small group of men, or one man, or woman, man or woman. That is simply too dangerous given the nature of human beings to be corrupted. And so when we see Saudi Arabia using its military might in places like Yemen and Lebanon, and just indiscriminately slaughtering peasant villagers, and it's all in the name of political motivations that are global. The local people who are actually being killed have no idea what's going on. And it's no wonder that they choose to take up arms and fight against those who are aggressing against them. And we have to understand that this is going to be the way that people are going to respond. They have no other choice than to respond this way, even though they don't understand the larger picture, which, according to the high-level politicians, is actually better for them in the long run. Well, it just doesn't work that way. So it's a very complex world that we live in, and the various fighting sides are looking at different pieces of the same puzzle. And those pieces, those individual pieces, may be very different. And they may not even see that they fit into the same puzzle. So it gets it even more complex and more confusing. And that is why, of course, ultimately, we have to look to what binds people together and allows them to feel similarly about some very basic aspects of life. And that would be just the fact that we're alive, we're living, we're human. Ultimately, that is the great uniter. That doesn't mean we need to get rid of countries, but we just need to understand that how precious human life is, and we can enjoy being alive, and that we can be okay. In fact, people who resort to these violent political solutions, very often they just don't have any faith that they could be protected, they can be okay. It's sort of like the old saying, have faith in God, but always make sure your camel is tied up. And so that doesn't mean that you don't take care of business. You have to take care of your basic needs, your shelter, your food, your clothing, a source of income. Make sure that your family is protected. And once you have those basic needs met, then you can allow yourself to settle into that mindset of peaceful coexistence with other people, and start seeing beyond those competitive needs that are pushing everybody in different directions and forcing people to get into conflict situations. So we have to, I'd like to think that there is an evolutionary process that's going on, that we are learning as a species, that we don't need to go to the level of violence that we're seeing, that we can always find a way to resolve our differences without resorting to the extremes. But there are powerful forces that do not want us to resolve our differences peacefully. And those people are those who profit from creating all the paraphernalia of war. They want war. The standing military, the grunt soldier in the Army, Air Force, Marines, Navy, they want war oftentimes. That's because they feel like they were trained. I mean, I've heard these guys, young men, and this is a very immature view I think. They will say, well, I was trained to do a job, and if I'm not allowed to do that job, then I'm going to feel like the second string quarterback who never gets to play. He never gets on the field at all. And of course, they're talking about combat. They want to see combat. They feel like they were trained to see combat, and therefore they should be able to experience combat. And this is really not a good attitude. That is not why you were trained. You were trained to be there in case there was a need for you. Not you were trained so that you could be in a war. That's not why you're trained. You're not trained so you could be in a war. You're trained so that your presence will perhaps even act as a deterrence to war. And so even though you're not actually doing anything, you're not fighting, you're not in combat, you are doing something. And what you're doing ostensibly by not engaging in conflict is actually more useful, more beneficial to you, to everyone else, than actually being in combat. Combat is the last resort, not the first resort. It's not, it's like, I never got to see combat. I actually know a Marine who always regretted that he was not able to see combat. The guy is in great shape, he's got a great family, he has his health, he has all his limbs, he has a good job, his life is good. He has a nice place to live. He's got everything that he could want in his life. But what would he have if he were in combat and he came back and he was wounded and let's say, had PTSD, and he had all the issues and all the problems that come from being in combat, that sense of guilt, survivor guilt. People in combat actually come back with this sense of that they don't deserve to be alive. Why was it my buddies that were killed and not me? And they obsess over this. And then the memories, the nightmares, just the nightmares alone from being in combat can disrupt your life. Not to mention all these other things. Not to mention combat wounds, mental as well as physical, spiritual, but also the wounds, the poisoning from the toxicity of being in combat. Yes, because combat is toxic. Toxic chemicals. Handling depleted uranium ammo, 50 caliber and above. It's radioactive. And when it is fired, when a shell from a tank or a gun is shot into a building or another vehicle, and then the Marines or the Army are sent in, the guys are sent in to clear that area, that whole area is full of radioactive particles that are floating around in the air in the dust because the DUI shell explodes on impact and aerosolizes all those radioactive particles, and they're spread everywhere. And you're inhaling that DUI. DUI, depleted uranium, my friends. It's made from the uranium that is used in nuclear power plants in where they enrich the uranium. Some of the uranium is enriched, and the rest is depleted. Well, it doesn't mean it's not safe, it's still toxic, it's still radioactive. And those particles can lodge in your lungs, and they just radiate in one spot. And they just continue to radiate. So your whole body is poisoned over time. And this causes severe health problems, and you can even poison your family. Your child can have severe birth defects because the radioactivity actually gets into the semen, causes mutations in the semen, and then you have a problem with the child. And then this is not something that anyone would want to experience. I mean, the reality is that the DUI ammo has actually been banned, but yet the U.S. military still uses it because it's very useful. It's very dense. But that DUI is being spread around the world. It's in the Balkans, it's in the Middle East, it's in North Africa, and who knows where else, wherever DUI shells are expended on, let's say, a military base in the United States, then it's just there. It's just not going anywhere unless it's cleaned up. I mean, it is a mess. It is a global mess. And so for people to say, well, you know, I wanted to get into combat, I mean, how incredibly, I hate to say this, ignorant is that? That you would actually have that attitude? That is completely the wrong, totally wrong attitude. To make the comparison between a soldier and a team member on a football team is completely erroneous. And it is not logical. There is no comparison. To say it's apples and oranges is not even extreme enough. It's like Twinkies and hammers. You know, there is no comparison between a football team and a soldier, a team of, an army, a group of soldiers. The motivations are completely different. You know, the strange thing is, though, of course, is that football is set up as a military exercise, and it's very tribal. There's two teams fighting against each other, and it's symbolic war. Well, a lot of games are symbolic war. It doesn't mean it's the same thing as war and can be compared to war. Chess is symbolic of war, and in order to train the aristocracy in hundreds of thousands of years ago, or thousands of years ago, they used chess to hone strategic skill, to hone logic, to get your thinking in line. But it doesn't cover the bases in terms of the dimensions, the horrific quality of war. Those are not addressed in a game of chess at all. And the stupidity that we see on both sides of war. So we say, well, we have to go to war sometimes. Yes, unfortunately, that has been the way it is in the world. But let's keep it in its proper perspective. It is not something that people do as a sport. It is not fun. It is not a game. It's not a way to make money. You can make money. Some people can make money at the cost of the lives of thousands or millions of people. But yet we have the military-industrial complex, which thrives on war, must have war, and uses war in order to control its own people as well as to gain territory for its empire. So war is used for a lot of different reasons that are illegitimate. You have the problem of very wealthy, very powerful people who are essentially bored. They're crazy. The boredom makes them crazy. And they feel like, well, I have to do something meaningful in my life. And they think, well, my life has no meaning. I have all this money. I have all this power. I already have all the prostitutes, all the drugs, all the toys, all the vacations I could ever want. The beautiful palace. I have several beautiful palaces. I have all the clothes. I have access to fancy cars. I have a yacht. I have a jet. So what am I going to do with my life? And they think, you know what? I'm going to make the world a better place for people like me and everybody. But number one, for me and my friends. Don't forget my friends, my family, my buddies, all my relatives, everybody in my class who thinks like me. We need to run the show, and these people, anyway, these other people are ignorant masses, unwashed, the great unwashed, the lowing herd. You've heard all of the ways in which ordinary people, working class people, middle class people are relegated to the status of ignoramuses by the aristocracy and those who are wealthy. America has an aristocracy. It's an aristocracy of wealth and power. They don't have titles, but they might as well have. And really, that's the way it is all the way around the world. There are plenty of so-called aristocrats who have no money and don't have any power. And are they respected? Do people follow their orders? No, they don't. So really, the title is not that important. It's whether or not you have the wealth. So here we have a bored, wealthy, powerful person, and they have, like Donald Trump. Donald Trump is supposed to have $8 to $10 billion. Well, he decides he's bored. What's he going to do with the rest of his life? I know, I'll become president, he decides. Well, a lot of people feel like, well, we'll see how he goes. Maybe it's worth it. Maybe we should try something like that. He seems to be successful. He's certainly funny and entertaining. I don't think that people really believe that he's going to do what he says. I don't think they believe that Donald Trump or any of them are going to really do what they say. Even if they wanted to, they wouldn't be able to. President Obama, hope and change. Do people have more hope? I don't think so. Was there change? Sure, there was change under Obama. But is it actually helping people very much? Not very much. I mean, the Obamacare is causing lots and lots of problems that people didn't have before. Some people are happy with it. Many people are very unhappy with it. There are still, I guess, 29,000 people in the United States who have zero health coverage. A lot of the younger people are having trouble paying the premiums. There's always going to be a bite on people who are living paycheck to paycheck. If they're forced to buy a product that's going to cost them even $100 a month, that's going to be $100 a month too much for them. That's going to be a bite. That's going to be difficult because they're living month to month, week to week, paycheck to paycheck. They don't have any savings. If there are emergencies that come up, like your car, that's the most common one probably. Your car has a problem. The transmission goes out, let's say. You have to pay for that, and that's going to be, okay, that's going to be $1,000. So $1,000, so then you put it on your credit card, and then you think, well, I'm going to pay it back, $100 a month. You see the issue, you see the problem that people get in. They can't make it, so they're struggling. A lot of people are struggling. They would rather just say, well, I'll just go without insurance and take my chances, and at least I won't have to pay these premiums. And that'll make my life a little easier. Well, people can do that. If you're young, you are less likely to get sick. And I would recommend anybody who decides to go without insurance to really look into being a vegetarian, because your chances of not getting a serious illness are increased tremendously if you go vegetarian. If you stay away from the artificially produced foods made with GMOs, made with all the artificial ingredients that are put in to preserve those foods, to flavor those foods, to color those foods, all of those are going to increase your chances of getting sick. And this is just common sense. This is prudence. And they say, well, it's a lot cheaper just to eat ramen noodles and go to the fast food joint to eat than it is to buy fresh food, organic, and cook it yourself at home. No, it's not. No, it's not cheaper. It's more expensive. Vegetables are not that expensive. Meat is expensive. And so there's so much that people can do that they need to do in order to get themselves in a place where they can be independent. You can get yourself out of debt. If you need to be creative in your thinking. You need to understand that you have to live below your means, not just within your means, but below your means. Many people live above their means. They feel like, well, I'm only going to live once, and by golly, I want this, I want that, I want new furniture. I'm not going to live in an apartment and not have new furniture. And they go and they pay outrageous prices for furniture that's probably crap, but it's new. And then they pay on it. Oh, it's only $50 a month for 5 years to pay this furniture off. And then when do we see the trucks coming in to take that furniture back? Or they say, I'm not going to get a used car, I'm going to get a new car. I want a new car, I deserve a new car. No, you don't. You don't deserve a new car. You deserve to get exactly what you can afford and no more. And you need to be discerning and do your homework to get a car that's going to be reliable, a used car. There are so many good cars out there that are used. It's amazing. It's amazing. Go to a big city. Look through Craigslist in the big city to see how many cars are for sale on any one day, and for not very expensive. All these people are trying to sell cars, and they're competing with each other to get the price down to the point where people who were searching for cars will see a good deal and they'll get that particular car. There's so many ways. We have to think in those ways. This is the way our grandparents lived, our great-grandparents, our great-great-grandparents. This is nothing new. People have been having to save and scrimp on luxuries for a very, very long time. This is the way the world is. And we have to think in those terms. That's how you preserve your freedom. That's how you preserve your independence. That's one of the major ways that you do it. The way we're going to lose our freedom is through debt. when you have to pay off debt, you have a load on your shoulders that's a heavy load. And we need to get free of that load. Freedom is a precious commodity, and it's essential to human beings for happiness. Our Declaration of Independence has that statement in it, and it's pretty well understood by psychologists that your anxiety, if you're out of debt or your debt is very manageable, you will have more relaxation. You'll be able to sleep better. The level of anxiety is reduced. So we have to think in terms of that. We simply have to. And this is, unfortunately, I think, the way the future is going to go. We're not going to be getting Bernie Sanders in as our president, and who is going to institute a wonderful system in which people will be getting free stuff, all this money, free college, single-payer health care. We won't have to be going into the military. It'll be a beautiful, idyllic world. I don't think that's going to be happening. Even in the democratic socialist societies of the countries that are the most have the highest standard of living in the world, even those countries are having difficulties. They're having difficulties with, one of the things they're having difficulties with is simply because people who don't have jobs and don't have motivation to do anything and have no struggle in their lives are not very happy. They tend to be grumpy. They tend to be bored. They tend to get into all kinds of other shenanigans, like in the case of the northernmost states like Sweden, Norway, Denmark, even the Netherlands, you have a high level of alcoholism or drugs. So there is something to be said for a person striving against adversity and solving the problems and moving on their own initiative, using their own creativity, using their own ingenuity, using their mind to solve the problems and figure out a way. This is where human beings really shine. That's what we're really good at. And it's possible to do that, to gain that good feeling that you get from a job well done and a sense of freedom that you have achieved this. And it may have taken you 20 years to do it, but you figured out a way that made sense. And it's all about, a lot of it is all about education. It's about understanding. It's about awareness. It's about reflective thinking, about looking at an issue or a challenge from all sides. Is there even really a challenge? Or do you just think it's a challenge? Do you need to go over this problem? Do you need to destroy this problem to go through it? Or could you just go around it? Or does it even exist at all? Is it just an illusion? And when you understand it, it simply melts away and isn't even there in the first place. Many of our problems, our challenges, our issues, with understanding and awareness, they've dissolved, that we realize that it was our own fear that created that problem in the first place. And when we become self-aware and we understand, we have the understanding, we grow. We grow as a human being. We take on new dimensions. We become more complex. There are multifaceted aspects to our personalities. That's because we become used to seeing things from different angles. You can think your way out of problems if we use our minds as the tool that our mind was created to be in the first place. Our mind is there for a reason. We need to use it. Our intellect is an important tool. It's the most valuable tool that we have. So let's use it. But don't forget that we cannot make ourselves happy by thinking, by our mind, by our intellect. It is incapable of making us happy. It can solve problems, but the happiness comes from within. It comes when the weight is lifted, and the intellect can help lift that weight. The weight is lifted, the worries diminish or dissolve, and so there are no more worries. And we have an understanding that it's all okay. Then we can feel good. We begin to feel good. It's like everything's great. I'm alive. I'm okay. I can enjoy my life. I can enjoy being alive. So this is very important for every human being. I mean, the politics are always going to be crazy. Our leadership, they're always going to be crazy, as benign as they try to be. They are not going to be able to solve our issues. We cannot rely on our leadership to make us happy, just like we cannot rely on our doctor to make us happy. The doctor can only do so much. And the doctor doesn't know us as well as we know ourselves. The doctor can make a recommendation. Should we have faith and trust in that doctor that that is the right thing to do because he's an all-knowing God? Or should we listen to what the doctor has to say and then see if that recommendation actually resonates? Does it seem like the right thing to do? Are we responding? Is something within us going, yes, that's it, that's it. Yahoo, I have a feeling that I'm responding. There's something inside of me responding. That's the answer. That is how we learn. That's how we can be helped by a doctor. Not just blindly taking the recommendation. Now, it could be that that doctor has no recommendation that seems right to us. So maybe we need to go see a different doctor. Or maybe we don't need a doctor at all. Or maybe we can start making recommendations to the doctor. Like, well, what if I did this, doc? What do you think about that? Do you think that would be a good move? And that might be something that he never thought of. He might go, yeah, that sounds like it could work. You might try that. So we can actually be our own best doctor in some ways. I do think that doctors, just like leadership, they tend to fall into the role that has been assigned to them by their profession, to the extent that they really believe they are infallible. And when we as patients offer an alternative idea or a suggestion or have a brainstorm, then and the knee-jerk reaction is no. That was not my idea, and therefore it's not good. It can't be right. I'm the doctor. I have an MD. I went to college for years. You didn't. I know what's right. In other words, I'm a God and you're not. I'm superior being and you're not. That might be the reaction. And this is the same way with leadership. I saw an interesting interview, very short, with Jeb Bush before he dropped out, in which a reporter asked him, what about the 28 redacted pages from the 9/11 Commission report? Would you like to see those? And Jeb Bush says, sure, I'd like to see them. Do you have them? And that was a very flippant and arrogant remark, because Jeb Bush knew that the reporter didn't have them. How could the reporter have the 28 missing pages? But it was just a way to dismiss that reporter and make light of it, even though that 28 pages is supposed to reveal the connection of the Saudi Arabian monarchy and government with 9/11. That they had something to do with the whole scenario on 9/11. I don't know if that's true or not. That's what the rumor is. And that might affect American thinking. But, of course, the mainstream media is not going to really accentuate that, even if those 28 pages become available for public review. The mainstream media will not pound away at it. Why? Why is that? That's because Saudi Arabia is a very close ally of the United States. Saudi Arabia provides an enormous amount of black gold to Europe, to the United States. And that source of oil must not be jeopardized in the view of many, many people. We are so reliant on oil. So right now the United States is the main supplier of weaponry to Saudi Arabia, which is using that weaponry in its proxy war against Iran in the various countries, its neighboring countries that are allied with Iran. Now, apparently no one is overtly attacking Iran itself. Now, the Obama administration has been crowing about the deal that they made with Iran. Iran will no longer enrich uranium in return for the lifting of sanctions and all these other goodies that they're going to get. But if Iran reneges on its part of the bargain, then the deal is off. Well, guess what? Already it is unhappy. It's feeling like it's not being treated fairly according to the terms of the deal, and so therefore it is not going to comply, and bingo, the whole thing starts to fall apart. And a lot of this is just exactly what happened with Iraq with Saddam Hussein. You make a deal, you snooker them into a deal, then you renege on the deal, they get mad, they renege on their part of the deal, you blame them and say, we're not reneging on our part of the deal, you're not following through with part of the deal that belonged to you, and therefore we're going to war, we're going to destroy you. And that might be the scenario that we see played out. And if this happens, people fear World War III because Russia is behind Iran, backing it up. If anybody attacks Iran, it's war. That's what Russia's saying. Now, I don't know if that's going to happen. Who knows? And I don't even know if that's how it'll play out or if that's the intent of the United States to snooker Iran into no longer following its obligations under the agreement. And then, boom, they drop the hammer. We'll see. I saw only a little bit of the Republican debate last night. It was really a crazy show. A lot of antagonism towards Trump by the reporters who were hammering away at him just relentlessly, calling him a con man and everything else, to try to break his hold because they are afraid to death of Trump. For one thing, he's way, way too liberal for the Republicans. He's very much more like a Democrat. He's almost exactly like a Democrat. But yet, the Democrats are scared to death of him too. They're scared to death of Bernie. They want The establishment candidate, Hillary, just as much, as far as I'm concerned, just another politician, another crooked politician. Trump may be no better. None of them are particularly that great. But what are we going to do at this point? So that's all there is for today. Have a great weekend and sleep well.